Hello again. Making short crust pastry isn't nearly as difficult as people think, and actually it's so much nicer than the stuff you buy. So I'm going to make some short crust pastry now and use it to line a flan tin. So here we go. Now I'm going to make what's called 200 grams of short crust pastry. What that really means is that I'm going to start off with 200 grams of plain flour. And to that we've got to add some fat. And typically these are the sort of fats that people would consider. I would immediately discard soft margarine, because as it says, it's good for fluffy cakes, but it's hopeless for pastry. It makes very, very hard pastry and it's very yellow. Butter is okay. Again, it's very yellow pastry and it has a particular flavour that you don't always want. Really, your pastry needs to just not taste of much because it's all about the filling. So I'm going to take those two away and we are left with those. And the reason that they are so good is because block margarine gives you a good golden colour. It has a tendency to be a little bit hard, but if you use some white fat like Trex or lard, that makes incredibly crumbly pastry. So combine the two, you get a nice colour and you get a nice texture. So for my 200 grams of flour, I need half the weight in fat, and I've got a mixture of the two. So I've got a total of 100 grams of fat, and that's 50 of margarine and 50 of Trex. And I'm going to put those in my bowl now. And they do need to be cold. So make sure you don't have them out of the fridge for too long before you start. To that, I need to add just a pinch of salt, just a little bit, and that helps the flavour. And then because they're quite big, I'm going to cut those up and just get them coated in flour. Because as people often say, you make good pastry if you've got cold hands. Well, we haven't all got cold hands, so let's not handle this too much. So by cutting them, you've made a start on making a finer texture. So we use our fingertips because they're cold, and we use our thumb against our fingertips. We lift a whole load of this up, rub it, and let it fall through our fingers. Like that. Lift, rub, drop. Lift, rub, drop. And you don't do this palms together action that some people talk about being the way that they make their pastry. Your palms are very hot and they'll melt the fat. So it's got to be fingertips. And you just keep going until you have a texture that resembles breadcrumbs, vaguely, and all the big lumps have gone. Give it a good old mix so that you're not always working in the same place. Just keep going now until you've got breadcrumbs. Now, if you think you've finished, a good way of checking is to get hold of, oh look, no flour on my palms, there you go. Get hold of the sides of the bowl and shake it, keeping it on the worktop. And big bits will come to the top. So I know I haven't finished because I've got some nice big bits still there. So keep going. There we are, that's ready. No flour on my palms, I'll get those just wiped off. Now the next thing we have to add is water. And the amount of water that you need will vary depending on the make of flour that you use and the temperature of your fat. If it's a hot day and your fats were a little bit soft and you were a bit soft, you may not need quite as much as I'm going to use. And today I'm going to put in 4 tablespoons because I know that that's what I'm going to need. So nice cold water. 3, 4. And then we stir with a blunt knife so that we don't get too much of a scratching on the bottom of the bowl. And what we're looking for is for the mixture to start to gather together in quite big clumps. So bring some of the dry stuff down to the centre and keep stirring. And when really not much more is happening, clean off the knife and you go in with your hand. And we're not going to knead this, we're going to just squeeze it together. If you knead it, what you do is to lengthen the strands of gluten like you would do for bread, and that will give you tough pastry. So it's just a squeeze. And you just keep working it, turning it over, because you'll be able to feel that there are wet, sticky patches, and you want those to soak up the remaining dry bits of flour and whatnot. Turn it and lean on it. Just squeeze. We really aren't kneading. And eventually you'll finish up with a nice firm ball of dough. If it's too sticky, add some more flour, but be very careful because you will then alter the proportions of half fat to flour. So I'll just get all that off my hands, work that in. And now I'm going to roll it on the worktop. So I'll move these out of the way, and I need a bit of flour. Now if you've got water, just get rid of that. Little bit of flour on the table, bit there if I need some more. And then the dough goes on the work surface. I want to finish up with a circle, so I'm going to start with a circle. It's a disc, a slightly flattened ball. And I need my rolling pin next, and I can put some flour on the rolling pin and start to roll. Now, because I'm going to use a flan tin, I think I ought to bring that over as well and show you how to get that ready. The whole thing needs to sit on a baking tray. So that's what I'm going to be using. Let's take that off for a second. So this is the size I'm aiming for. It's quite big, isn't it? But don't worry, I'll be fine. So gently backwards and forwards. You're not a steamroller, so don't press so hard that it just becomes really long on your first roll. Gently backwards and forwards, and then turn it. Bit more flour underneath perhaps. Roll in that direction. Some people roll sideways, but if you do that, there's a risk that your pressure becomes uneven and you finish up with pastry that's thick one side and thin the other. So keep going forwards and backwards straight ahead of you, and then turn it again. And you can turn it just a little bit to increase the shape and the size of the circle that you're achieving. Keep going round and round. Just gentle pressure. You can see it's getting a bit bigger, but it's growing slowly. It's not something to rush, and it's soon going to be a bit too big to move. Now, here's a skill. Right, when it's too big, put your rolling pin just below halfway, pick up the far edge, lift it over, and then you can hold it, flour underneath, and then gently unroll it in the other direction. If you've got a lump of fat or a sticky bit, just pat some flour on it and keep going until it gets big enough. So you could make an apple pie with this, you could make sausage rolls, you can use this for all sorts of things, mince pies at Christmas. There's a sticky bit just there. And then, to see if it's big enough, take your tin and just gauge. Now I can tell it's not wide enough, so what I'm going to do is turn it again. So over the top, unroll it, and roll some more in that direction. So keep rolling, and you want it to be about 3 millimetres thick, to be honest with you. There's nothing worse than pastry that's really too thick. So I think I'm probably there now. Oh look, that's a lot better. Right, now I've got it on the baking tray because there's more to get hold of. If you don't do that, it's very difficult to hold a tin, especially if it's got a loose base. So put it onto a baking tray, and I'm going to lift the pastry up and then bring the tray in front of me. And now I'm going to unroll it without resting on the edge of the tin because it's sharp and it will cut the pastry. Just gently let it unroll. And what we have to do now is ease the edges into the tin. So pick up the sides and push them down, and it will fight you. It will want to come out. You can turn the tin round, push it down all the way round. You want to get a good sharp edge where the base meets the side of the tin. Right, now I've been round once and I'm going to go round again. And I'm going to push it into that angle where the side meets the base. Okay. I think that's pretty good. And now, get your rolling pin, go over the top, and that trims your edges for you. Look at that. Okay, we'll peel those off. And when it goes in the oven, it goes into quite a hot oven, gas mark 6, which is 200 or 180 fan. You don't want that middle to rise up. We're going to bake it blind, which means cooking it empty, basically. But we don't want the centre to rise up, so we're going to just prod it with a fork. And that will get rid of any air bubbles, which sometimes we do want, but for this we really don't. And then we're going to put some greaseproof paper on. And we're going to put something just to weight it down. Now you can use your scraps of pastry and they will hold it down, or if you've got children you can let them play with that and roll it out and make jam tarts or something. If you have got baking beans you can use those, and that's what I'm going to do actually. I'm going to just take that off and show you these. And all you do is tip those on. They're ceramic, they're quite heavy, and they will hold your pastry down. That's all there is to it. Couldn't be easier. It goes in the oven now at gas mark 6 for 10 minutes with all this stuff in it, and then we'll take it out, we'll remove the beans and the paper, and it goes back in for another 10 minutes so that when it comes out it's pretty much cooked, and that way you're not going to have, I hesitate to say, a soggy bottom. So a high shelf, gas mark 6, 10 minutes. Now our timer has gone off. The flan case has had 10 minutes in the oven with the beans, and they now need to come out. So if you're using pastry, mind your fingers and lift it out. Using beans, they are incredibly hot because they're ceramic, so I suggest you get a spoon and scoop them out. If your paper is big enough, you can actually lift them up with the paper, but I've got some that have gone over the edge, so I've got to just get those out. Here we are. And you can use these for years, these things. They're expensive to start with, but they last forever. And some people use dried beans. They use dried red kidney beans and things. And again, you can use those for a very long time. The trouble with those, though, is that they actually develop a bit of a smell. So if you've got a birthday coming, have some baking beans. So we'll get all those out, and then we're going to very, very carefully lift out the greaseproof paper. Now mind your fingers and be careful it hasn't stuck. You can see that it's not cooked because it's still quite wet and soggy. You see that, there's wet patches, dry patches. That's going to go back in the oven now for another 10 minutes. If when you take it out you discover that one of your edges has collapsed, just push it back, and you can leave a piece of pastry or a few beans there just to hold it up while it goes in to finish off. So another 10 minutes now. Right, now we've had our second lot of 10 minutes. So we need to take it out and make sure that we've got no soggy patches. No, that's it. So that is ready to use, and you could use this for an apple tart. You could put stewed apple in the bottom and then slices of apple on the top and glaze it with sieved jam. I'm actually going to use mine for a savoury flan, so if you keep an eye out for the next video you'll see what I go on to do with this. So I hope you found this useful, and see you soon. Bye.